is Gary Atencio with CNTV, and today we're in Denver, Colorado. I'm here with GapNurse. Since 2019, this empowering technology is changing the world by rehumanizing healthcare. I am joined by Kevin Lundy, who is the founder, CEO. Thanks for joining us here today. Let's start off a little bit about yourself. I mean, you've been involved in home healthcare, nursing service, senior housing, quite a few things before you launched the company. Formally educated at Regis University, University of Phoenix, summa cum laude, I believe. You've got a lot going for you in the past. When I researched you, it really kind of seemed like this was a natural fit for you, a company to start like this. But I want to hear it from you. Prior to 2019, what was the journey like that led you up to the to deciding to start this?
Sure. So a few years before 2019, I had an opportunity to run a hospice agency. And I spent years building from scratch a nonprofit hospice agency. And our focus with that business was to care for people who might fall through the cracks, the people who they don't necessarily qualify for Medicare benefits of hospice.
Yeah.
And it's a larger audience, larger population than one might think. And we did great work. But all through the process, there was an underlying problem that was hitting us pretty hard. And it was, hospice itself is a pretty heavy industry for a lot of people. There's a lot of emotional turmoil.
Yeah.
And loss and grief. Yeah, you bet. And so what happened was we were experiencing burnout, systemic burnout from those nurses. We'd have a lot of great people come in and they'd work with us, but over time, because of the emotional burden, they just had to leave. But I soon discovered that the turnover that we were experiencing in our little agency was industry-wide. It became such a problem as I went out and met with customers and colleagues in the industry. It became this really common theme. So I made a decision in 2017 to leave that business and try to do something that might help the industry as a whole, the healthcare industry as a whole. It just spoke very personal to me. I watched the breakdown of one of my closest colleagues happen, not because she wasn't gifted, not necessarily even because of the emotional turmoil of the patients dying, but because of the stress that she was under trying to get nurses to fill in shifts at 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning to go pronounce a death or something like that. And over time, I witnessed her actually having a mental breakdown. And it struck me, we were very close, and it struck me as particularly hard. And I just felt an overwhelming need to do something to help. And, we do our part, we do whatever we can, but I soon realized that technology might actually be a solution. And so I went out and I met with various people in the industry, and I had an opportunity to kind of put together a game plan and then bring some folks in who had better ideas than me. They were much smarter than me. And together, collectively, we built what is now GapNurse.
That is a fantastic story, a personal story that you bring forward. Those are usually the case when it comes to entrepreneurs out there. Something that really strikes them, they have to do something about it. I mean, 2020, we just went through this. Much change for everyone out there. Our lives all changed. The industry that really rose to the forefront, that really came out in the public eye, was the healthcare industry. I mean, do you think this was the first glimpse that the public out there was able to kind of see a little bit some of the demands that the healthcare industry is going through?
I think it's the public as a whole, public at large, yes. But I think that all throughout time, a lot of people have been affected in their personal lives, whether it's, having to put your parents into a nursing home or into a hospital. What are we going to do after they get discharged? That's something that's been going on with families for years and years. But because of COVID, because of all that came out during COVID, the healthcare workers, as opposed to the industry, really became prominent. Yeah. And for the longest time, healthcare workers people would go out at 8 o'clock at night and start cheering for the nurses and doctors who were caring for people in these COVID units. But lately, there are people outside of the hospitals protesting these people, right? They're standing outside, stop caring for, there's political variances, whatever. We don't deal with that stuff, right? Yes. But, all throughout the process, these people are being asked to work unusual hours. Like, it's one thing to say, I'm committed to the profession of caring for people. It's a whole other thing to be finding yourself working double shifts and triple shifts, 16 hours a day, 18 hours a day, where you're working with people on ventilators, etc. It's demanding. Yeah. It's super demanding, and these people are exhausted. And what administrators in healthcare are challenged to do is keep those people on staff. And here's the funny thing. There's this whole travel nurse industry, right? And so with travel nurses, you're seeing nurses leave and go work for 3-4 times their average salary. So put yourself in the position of a local facility administrator, and how do you retain somebody at $35, $38 an hour when they can go down the street and get their hotels paid for, their food paid for, and end up earning $130 an hour? It's impossible for these guys, and they're already working off of 7 to 9% margins. So they're under a lot of pressure, and we're here to help them.
Two sides there of the table there that are both very much challenging. These issues, like you say, they've always existed, but yet during a crisis, they're amplified. Yes. Things like mismanagement, burnout, even mistreatment. Sad to say, is this more commonplace than we'd like to admit?
Fortunately, if you look at the statistics, it's happening all day, every day. Mistreatment comes in a lot of different forms for nurses. Yeah. Mistreatment comes in the form of patients who might be suffering from memory issues, something along those lines, and in very many cases, they become abusive towards their caregivers. Likewise, the abuse is systemic, right? It's systemic in that a lot of administrators are under so much pressure that they'll turn to nurses and they'll say, I know you've just worked a double shift, but we have nobody else coming in. You have to do it or you lose your job. So they're being threatened in ways, that's another form of abuse, right? So they're being threatened in ways that, because of what's going on with this shortage and with the burnout and the turnover and the travel nurse situation, these people are suffering abuses just because they want to care for people. And it just doesn't seem right.
That doesn't seem right at all. I mean, as these realities become pervasive, it has to affect the morale and even the quality of care. Is that something that you have witnessed and probably is kind of hard to see?
Yes, unfortunately. It's the quality of care that becomes the biggest issue, right? Because we all trust these facilities when it comes time to them caring for our own parents, if we're in that situation. And when somebody is tired, when they're just burnt out from the day to day to day of the regulatory pressures and the labor shortages, when it comes to all of that, they're just exhausted. These caregivers, the registered nurses, the licensed practical nurses, the CNAs, they're exhausted. And it's very easy to make mistakes when you're exhausted. So that is quality of care. That's a big quality of care issue.
That is interesting. Let's talk about this technology now. You have created a way for really to securely automate staffing. So let's talk about who this is for. The clinicians. Are we talking every type of nurse, CNA, RNs, LPNs, you name it? Tell me about that side.
Sure. So the technology is really for two parties, right? Mm-hmm. On one hand, it's for those facility administrators who are in need of the staff. And they're in need of the staff now, or they're in need of the staff in 2 weeks when there's, registered, or when there's when somebody's applied for personal time off or something, or sudden absences. But it's also for the nurses, and it's really for the nurses, right? Because when I say nurses, I'm talking registered nurses, LPNs, CNAs. There's also QMAPs in Colorado. There's med techs in multiple states. But these folks are people who care for people, right? They're the front line of people care. Mm-hmm. And what the platform was built to do is it was built to offer them flexibility. So they can choose the schedules that they want. And yes, they can earn more money. So where a facility might be typically outsourcing staffing to an agency, a staffing agency, we're not a staffing agency. We're allowing nurses who are independent contractors to pick and choose their own schedules, work in the environments that they're best suited for, and if they're a great match, we help to facilitate a permanent placement if the facility is interested in hiring them as well.
So they now have a way that these professionals can really control their lives. I mean, control their schedules, be comfortable about where they're going, what they're doing. How has the response been from the nurses that have taken part?
A little bit overwhelming, and we didn't really expect that. We expected, slow, steady growth.
Yeah.
But what we're finding is that a lot of the nurses are now using the GapNurse platform as their personal scheduler, and they're able to work in those facilities where they want, when they want. So the response from them has been tremendous. They've been saying, I like working here, but I don't want to do it on a full-time basis. I like working through the GapNurse platform because if I want time off, if I'm tired and I need a day off, nobody can tell me that I have to go to work today. So they like the freedom and the flexibility that it gives them.
That is interesting. I mean, what's nice about the platform also, we're talking about a day's pay for a day's work. You're able to see that pay rather quickly, and like you said, and even end up getting higher pay than you would have elsewhere. Tell me about that.
So the platform actually gives the facilities the opportunity to pay whatever they want. So we're not setting rates. That's something that agencies typically do. And so what they're allowed to do is they're allowed to adjust pay according to opportunity demand. So if there are no nurses accepting assignments, shift assignments at what their normal pay hours are, they can adjust the pay up to $5. $5 more, $5 more, whatever increments they so choose. They can set whatever rate they want. The nurses have an opportunity to look at the pay for the assignment and deny it. They don't have to take it.
Sure.
So if the facility sees that nobody's accepting assignments, they'll increase the pay. And then the nurses look at it and they say, now it's at a point where I'm willing to work for it, and they'll accept those assignments. The funny thing about that is that the nurses are actually accepting assignments typically at rates far below what agencies would normally charge. So the facilities are saving a ton of money.
That's great, because really it's a win-win on both sides you're looking at. So really it's as easy as them having documents in hand, signing up in the app, logging in, and then it's easy as getting notifications right there on your phone as to what you want to do. Is that set up by area? Do they decide the areas they want to work? Explain that.
Yeah, so we're tending to work in what we call pod format, and so what that allows is it allows nurses within, it's not even us, it's the regulations dictate that somebody who is working only work within a certain area so that they can be there, respond to a call as they need to. But we tend to work in a pod format. So, for example, in the Denver metro area, if you're in South Denver, there are enough facilities in South Denver that somebody living in Centennial can get to. Likewise, if you're in North Denver, somebody in Thornton can get to Brighton easily, or wherever. So it's a pod format, but it's not limited to the pods. We just tend to promote the assignments a little bit more to help those people know that they're out there.
Obviously, with control like this comes contentment, satisfaction, choosing where you're comfortable, choosing where you feel you're safe and you're not going to be abused and that type of thing. Is that exciting for you to read some of the reviews and testimonials of what people have to say?
Well, it's very humbling. Absolutely, it is. But when we endeavored to do this in the first place, we were just trying to help. We were trying to fix a problem. But when we see how we've affected people's lives, when we see that people are genuinely engaged and appreciative of what we've done, there's no other word but humbling, really.
Wow, that's wonderful. I mean, this system is pretty complex. I mean, it's easy for the end user, but it's pretty complex if you look behind the screen. We're talking about a system that keeps a lot of this information accessible, notes, documentation. Is that important for both sides?
Absolutely. It's all HIPAA protected. We are running everything through Amazon Web Services, and we have business associate agreements with them. So it's all secure, safe, etc. But yeah, it's very, very important from a workflow perspective to understand. It's one thing to get a nurse in there, but we're not trying to provide warm bodies. We're trying to provide people who are qualified and appropriate for any given assignment. And so once they get in there, though, it's very important that they be oriented to the facility and its needs. It's very important that they provide accurate documentation, so when they're gone, the facility can continue with that patient care with their regular staff or whatever, without any kind of any kind of hesitance whatsoever.
That's interesting. Obviously, this is advantageous, beneficial to the nurse side. Let's talk a little bit about the facility side. Before GAP came along, what was the alternative? What was the norm? Are we talking about agencies, and how are they set up so differently?
Yeah, agencies are the norm. Agencies really kind of focus on putting their employees into a facility. They tend to work off of fairly high retainers. They tend to work off of very high transaction rates. They have minimums very often where somebody has to work a minimum of 8 hours, or we can go down to 2 hours depending on the need. But agencies, as a general rule, are the norm. The problem is, from the facility manager's perspective, is agencies are extremely expensive, and when you're working off of already slim margins, it's difficult to. So most facilities don't want agencies in there at all. They've become a necessary evil. Right? However, they fill the gap, right? So what we're trying to do is offer an alternative to the agency so that it just saves money. It frees up money for better patient care.
What I love about this is you're talking about, this automates the process of really filling that gap, like you're talking about, filling those open shifts. It's not forced. I mean, these people want to be there. They chose to be there. I would think that attitude has to permeate throughout the organization. Not only the patients may feel it, management has to feel it and know that this person wants to be here.
Yeah, it's funny because when you mention management, it's the management that's now coming to us and saying, can you provide these services for our facilities in Oregon? Can you provide these services for our facilities in Kansas and Texas? We are doing it in Florida as well currently. So it's the management that's turning around and saying, we need you in here, because they're saving money and they're getting happier people in here.
That is exciting. I mean, just as important is the fact that you've made it easy, but just as important is you're in compliance. And let's face it, we're talking about an industry that is, it's not a simple worker. There's certain demands that legalities have to take place. Is that something that is a real big factor?
It's everything. Without compliance, without meeting all the regulatory demands, we put people's, not only their businesses in jeopardy, but their incomes in jeopardy. And more importantly, what compliance is really all about is patient well-being. So when we talk about compliance, the essence of it is making sure that everything that we do in terms of matching a nurse to a facility is making sure that patients are cared for at the best possible quality standard, right? So it's all about patient care. But yes, everything we do, everything we've built is about compliance, from the moment of credentialing all the way through documentation, through quality ratings after the assignment is completed. Compliance is built 100% through, which is very different than agencies or some of these online staffing agency models you'll see.
So credentialing, documentation, even training, orientation, everything's HIPAA compliant. That has to be exciting for both sides, knowing that you're filling this gap, but at the same time making sure that you've crossed the T's, dotted the I's, and that back end is happy as well.
Absolutely. When we first went out to introduce GapNurse to the marketplace, that was the question we'd always hear from directors of nursing or facility administrators. Are you going to be compliant? Because it's normal for staffing agencies to cause these companies to fail surveys, to get survey deficiency tags.
Right.
So when we said yes, they said, "How are you doing that?" And now we're showing them, and they're saying, "Okay, now we need you in these other facilities. Now we need you in these other states." So it's pretty important.
Let me ask you this. I mean, obviously, you're providing something that is really flexible for people. They can do this on an hourly basis, per diem, even multi-day shifts. This is something that is flexible on both ends, and so when you see this happening and it's working, is this something you're excited to go out and tell other people about? And is that really now your mission, is just educating the public on its availability?
My mission, honestly, is to make sure, so here's what people don't know. This is the public dirty secret.
Yeah.
People don't know that eventually they're going to need care too. They might see it in their own parents, they might see it in their own lives, but eventually everybody becomes part of the healthcare system. And so our real mission is to make sure that when it's our turn, we're getting that Florence Nightingale version of a nurse, not the depressed, burned out nurse that we're going to rely on, right? So that's our mission. So yes, it's exciting. It's very exciting, but it's also really, really important. It's important to get it right because it's important to promote the profession of nursing as the profession that it is, right? These are licensed people who've gone through years of education and they're dedicating their lives to caring for people. Our mission is to make sure that they're not being mistreated. It's to make sure that they're able to care for people in a human environment, in a human to human interaction environment. It's to restore sensibility.
That is exciting. I mean, when you're no longer filling shifts with just a warm body, you're basically raising the bar on quality care because of the fact that it's affecting the culture of that organization. And that is the part that it's kind of hard to see on paper, but I bet to live in that organization after you've seen something like that can be very liberating for both sides.
Yeah, it is. It's I mean, we've all had personal experiences in our own lives that have kind of introduced us to the healthcare system. It's very rewarding. It's very liberating to know that you're part of tomorrow, right? That you're part of the future because this is where it's going, whether we like it or not. And we're seeing it. It's being forced on us because of COVID, because of other things. But this is where it's going. And we're always trying to stay one step ahead. So we're always focused on how to make it better, how to constantly improve. And that's what GapNurse is, constantly working to get better. But it's really exciting to be part of something that is the future.
That is neat. I mean, any professional out there wants to be more than just a number. Good management wants them to be more than just a number. And let's face it, being able to provide feedback from these nurses to the management, it's no longer a question of, are we taking care of you as well? You actually get to see it right there. That has to improve care as well.
Absolutely, and it's bi-directional, right? We have the opportunity, not only the nurses have the opportunity to provide care back to the facility that will help improve the facility's quality metrics,
Nice.
but the facility also has an opportunity to look back and say, this was our experience with you as a nurse, so it allows the nurse to improve and get better or receive accolades for the tremendous work that they've done. So it's bi-directional.
If you see a positive culture happening there within an organization, obviously that affects the community. That is the mission, really, of what you're trying to do here is affect the community, the culture of each organization. Does this continue to be rewarding for you?
You know, who knows what the future really holds, but I can't imagine ever wanting to do anything else. I mean, this is, I'm having the opportunity right now to impact people's lives in a positive way. And just like in the days of hospice, that's what I tried to do every day, right? Improve people's lives for whatever moments they had left in life. This is kind of taking that to a new domain because now we're caring for the caregiver, but it's the same care either way.
That is exciting. Definitely honored to tell your story. I'm glad you carved out some time for us. Viewers, let's take a look at the bottom of the screen right there. What you're going to see is their website. First of all, on the website, learn more about this mission that really was a personal story of a gentleman who had worked in the industry and seen burnout firsthand. A little too firsthand for his well-being. He decided to go out and actually do something about it. You can check out the process. It's very easy. We're talking about having documents in hand. They explain it for you. If you'd like to request a demo, they can do that for you as well. If you're a facility out there and you'd like to be a professional partner with them, you can see the rates right there. Everything is provided for you online. And this is more than just a system. We're talking about a dedicated support representative who can walk you through the steps if so needed. Once again, that is GapNurse since 2019, empowering technology that is changing the world by rehumanizing healthcare. This is Gary Atencio with CNTV. And if you don't know, now you know.